Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work at Milton Academy, an independent boarding and day school outside of Boston, Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. This week in the news, Julie and I discuss an article by David Brooks that appeared in the New York Times that makes a case for class-based affirmative action instead of race-based affirmative action. Our question comes from Ryan from Arizona, and she wants to know if her student should add a photo to their college resume. And it'll be the final part of my interview with Akil Bello on the topic, tough questions about test scores. And Lisa will finish up the final part of her college spotlight on East Carolina University. Friends, Julie and I recorded this conversation about class-based affirmative action before the Supreme Court decision, but nothing we said is invalidated now. It's as irrelevant now as it was when we recorded. I'm super excited, friends. I'm here with Julia. Hi, Julia.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm great. And you know, Julia, I know you were a great student in school because you are one of always my early bookers. So Julia books her sessions way in advance. Your only competition there is Lisa and maybe a little bit of Linda. You're my do the work in advance people.
Okay.
So we're recording this for July, in mid-June for July. Of course, you've got College Horizons coming up.
Yes, I'm super excited. It's in person.
I know. Super excited. And I'm excited about the article we're going to get to, and we'll get to it again. Your favorite word, quintile, came back. Do you remember that word from before?
I won't forget, though, ever again. I will always
You're cursed
get it
with
right.
The quintile word twice in a row. But
yes,
before we get into our article, Gia's going to share a tip with you.
All right. So I am thinking about, as my students are on their summer breaks, what they're doing with their time. And nearly all of them usually ask me one question, which is, what if I get a job or have to get a job? Am I going to be at a disadvantage when my uber privileged friends are shadowing their dad's friend's doctor, or their parents can pay for them to take a 3-week course at Brown? And I've actually found, including personally myself, as well as in 15 plus years of admission, that actually sometimes jobs translate a little better. They're a little more compelling in the sense that you're doing something that you might have to do, but you're probably actually gaining skills that are really going to set you up for success in college in ways that academics don't predict or other pieces don't predict. And in fact, maybe when you do matriculate at your college, since you might have references, you might be able to have a resume, an employer at your college is more likely to take you if you know how to write a business email, if you know how to answer phones, if you have customer service, or a lot of the times y'all are young. So the jobs you have are maybe not that glamorous, and it shows that you're willing to be flexible and versatile and sometimes do some of the work that's not as fun as people at the top. And actually, as much as I like to really limit the amount of extra letters that go in your file, I like to sometimes actually call my students' employers and ask them to give me some sound bites about how the student was. And that says so much about their personal qualities, their organizational skills. And it's a reality that actually a lot of students do have to work over the summer. This also applies to the fact if you've got maybe family or caretaker responsibilities. Speaking of college horizons, which I'm about to go on, a lot of our students that might be in certain areas of the country and live on reservations, one of their main activities, if you will, would be water hauling. You have to go and haul water back, and that can take hours out of your day. And that doesn't seem like something you might want to list on your Common App activity list. But anything that takes significant time out that is a responsibility of yours, I think actually lands a lot better on admission readers than maybe some sort of what sounds really glamorous, which is really often a function of just being in the right place at the right time and having the right resources. I would love one of my favorite stories about my admissions process. So first generation college student, I didn't really know what I was doing. And I actually only had one extracurricular in high school. I worked 37 hours a week at the mall near where I grew up. And shout out to Bryn Mawr. And I wish I remembered this admission officer name. This would have been like 2002. It was a little bit ago. It was the time where you could, interviews were going on, and I could not make an interview work because I was always after school at my job, and then I was in class. And the Bryn Mawr admissions rep met me at my job, let me just take 15 minutes off, and interviewed me while I'm wearing my Lindt chocolate apron.
That's
and
cool. I
and
didn't know this story.
yeah, and she observed me, and I actually feel like I got more out of that. I felt like I was able to show myself more, and also I never ended up applying to Bryn Mawr. Sorry, but I felt really seen by that office, and it really took some sort of some of the stress and nervousness I had about the process off of it, because it felt like, oh, you really were validating what I'm doing in my time outside of class. So I really do think having a work experience, whether it looks fancy or not, is going to go a long way. And you have some extra cash as well. And you often work with people who are different than you, right? A lot of my students are working with older folks who have maybe really different life experiences as them, especially if I had a student who, when the PGA Tour came through the Boston area, they were like a line cook, and they were with 45-year-old women, single moms, and then they were with some kids who just had their high school degree, and it was really a good experience for them to be exposed to other types of people and other types of work.
I'm really glad you said this, Julia. It's something I encounter. One of the biggest myths in the counseling room is that work, if it's not in your area of your major, is like meaningless, wasted time and means nothing from a college admission standpoint. And I encounter that myth a lot. And it actually came up yesterday in a counseling session, and nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, oftentimes you'll hear admission officers talk about the value of just getting a job. And I think there's several things with it. You hit on one of the main things, which is all the interesting people you meet and how it kind of keeps you in touch with sort of everyday people.
Right.
And I think that's something that's highly valued. There's other things too. It's like, shows that everything hasn't just been handed to you, and life isn't just on a silver spoon from your parents, and you sort of are having to learn that important skill of independence and having to pay for some of your own things by earning your own money for them. And then in the case of people doing it during the school year, that's another thing they're balancing, on top of all those responsibilities. I mean, look at you, one extracurricular.
Yep.
And it didn't stop you from getting into Vassar College. So they saw value. They saw value to that.
Thank you.
And so we just want to extol work. And it doesn't have to be, some sophisticated work. It can be fast food restaurants. It can be
Absolutely.
Uber drivers and DoorDash people and, lots of different things. So I'm a big, big believer of work. Thank you for that. So for our admissions vernacular, we're going with paired reading today. And, you'll hear paired reading used a couple ways, but I'm going to share a way. I know I haven't talked about it on this podcast before. A lot of times you'll hear the term CBE, committee-based evaluation. And we did a whole interview on the podcast on committee-based evaluation. You have to go all the way back to interview 60 with William Segura from Emory. That was the one where we had the sound issues, but we still made it through. Where he talked about CBE, and with CBE, sometimes people call it paired reading because two people read together, and one person focuses more on the academic materials, and the other person more on the personal, the extracurricular piece, and they have a conversation, and that's designed to get different perspectives. When I was at Vanderbilt, they use paired read. They say we do paired reading and not CBE. So that's actually what I'm talking about here. I love what Vanderbilt does. Vanderbilt doesn't do the you read the extracurriculars, you read the academic. Both people read the entire file, but then they sit together. So everybody's got the full exposure to the entire file. And the purpose of this is to identify blind spots that are biases, to help weed out biases, because we all have biases. We look for people like ourselves. And by having somebody there to challenge your own biases and to make sure you didn't miss something, paired reading. And that's what our word for the day is. And so I think it's fantastic that they do that. We know a lot of schools wouldn't do that because they don't have Vanderbilt's $10+ billion endowment to be able to afford to pay people to do that. But that's the benefit of being a well-resourced institution. Any thoughts, Julia?
I just love that. And I actually think it helps students sleep a little better at night. Like, I can't tell you how many times someone's like, what if they miss this? What if somebody, so checks and balances, I think it ensures fairness as well in the process.
And also, holds the admission officer a little accountable too. Coming in, knowing the other person's read the whole file, you're going to get exposed if you just blew through it and you're not really able to be conversant on all aspects of the file.
Oh, totally.
So there's some good accountability there.
We used to do that when I was at Haverford. We didn't do paired reading, but we did. You would be the first reader on a file, and then someone would be the second reader. And then based on your votes, the 2 votes, then the student would come to committee, and it would be like, exposing if somebody like, oh, I missed they were valedictorian, whoops. Or I'm like, oh, you just copied the first line of the teacher recommendation. You didn't read the rest of it. So, but I think it's always important. And then there was that third check in committee. So yes, I do like we are human. We are not AI yet. And so it is good to just make sure that biases and anything that might be missed are addressed.
Awesome. So paired reading, missions vernacular for the day. Yeah, Julia. So $52.5 million budget shortfall since 2018. You know what I bet they're thinking? I wish we paid John Bockenstead more, because that's like since when he left. I just looked at the calendar. That's when he left for Oregon State. And, this is going to come up in a conversation that we've got coming up here in not too many episodes from now, on an article that appeared in the Chronicle that looks at we're becoming a country of haves and have-nots. And so the article looks at the well-resourced schools, and it's not just the highly selective privates, it's also a lot of the flagships versus the rest of everybody, and how it's completely different. And so that's a topic we have coming up. And so I don't want to steal all the thunder now and do a complete expose on everything, but that's where I got that statistic from. Recent article that ran in mid-June in the Chronicle on haves and have-nots. It was kind of making its way around college admissions Twitter. College admissions Twitter, with the admission director saying, "You've got to read this, you've got to." And I read it, I was like, "Oh, geez, it's good but depressing." So that's the big number for the day.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
Okay, Julia, we have a doozy of an article today, and it's David Brooks, who's a center-right conservative, but he's rational and reasonable and intellectual. Obama called him my favorite conservative back in the day. So he's, deeply reflective. And he wrote this article in the New York Times, and super catchy title. It's called "Let's Smash the College Admission Process." Appeared June 1st. And here's what Brooks says. Now, let me give a preface. I already said Jill and I are recording this early. We're fully expecting the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action to be out by the time this goes live, but it still doesn't diminish the essence and the ideas of the article, which we can discuss. So Brooks starts out by saying, within days or weeks, the Supreme Court's going to render a decision on the future of affirmative action. He says, if things go as expected, conservatives are going to be cheering as the policies are struck down. Progressives are going to be wailing. And then he goes on to say, but maybe we can all take a moment to reimagine college admissions itself and how it's morphed into, and here's this very strong language, truly destructive institutions in American society. And he basically goes on to say modern college admissions era was launched about a half a century ago, and it did have good intentions. And the idea was, instead of just taking finishing schools from the Protestant establishments, talent factories like Milton over there, Julia,
Yeah,
people had
guilty.
handshake agreements with. Do you remember me telling you when I was in admissions, I had a Milton parent who said 40 kids in her class went to Harvard? I don't know if I ever told you that.
Yeah, no, I don't know, but probably
Yeah.
true at the time.
And she was one of the 40, by the way, and she was CEO of a 900-person company. But anyway, but it says that's how it used to work. You take these finishing schools from the Protestant establishment and have these handshake agreements. And now you're trying to say we're going to become talent factories for everybody. But it says in the end, elite universities merely, check this out, exchanged one privileged elite for another. And here's a quote from the article. Today, you don't need bloodlines stretching back to the Mayflower to have a decent shot in an elite school, but you do need to be born into a family with resources to make lavish investments in your early education. And then it quotes from my favorite economist. Regular listeners know, those in our listening family, my term for people who never miss an episode. You've heard me refer to Roz Chetty. And his 2017 research found that families in the top 1% of wage earners were 77 times more likely, I got to repeat that, 77 times more likely to get admitted into the Ivy League than if you were from a family that made under 30,000. And he goes on to say, it's not just the Ivy League. A study found that if you were in the top income quintile, so the top fifth, you were 16 times more likely to get into the University of North Carolina than if you were from the bottom quintile or the bottom 20%. So he's talking about all we did is exchange one privileged group for another. He goes on to say, we now have whole entire industries that make attendance at an elite school as a marker of whether they should hire you or not. He says these hierarchies built by admissions committees get replicated across society. And then he draws off the research from Richard Kahlenberg, author of the book, The Remedy, Class, Race, and Affirmative Action, who's been arguing that we should replace race-based system of affirmative action with a class-based system of affirmative action. He argues in an article he wrote in The Economist, based on some research done in 2018, that being economically disadvantaged in America poses 7 times as large an obstacle to a high-achieving student. That sounds even low to me, but anyway. And so he continues to share the research, and he was an expert plaintiff for this in a case seeking to overturn affirmative action, an exercise he did with Duke economist Peter Archiano-Cano. And here's a quote. Based on data from Harvard and the University of North Carolina, they built an admissions model that would end racial preferences and preferences for faculty, kids, and alumni, but it would boost applicants from poor families and disadvantaged neighborhoods. And according to the model, the share of African American, Hispanic, underrepresented students of color, and first-generation students would more than triple. He goes on to say, maybe this could be a moment we finally step back and acknowledge that the elite meritocracy has spiraled out of control. It's ridiculous that we built a culture in which people make fine distinctions between Princeton, Northwestern, and Penn State as if they were 18th century courtiers arguing over which aristocratic family had the grandest name. It's ridiculous that we built a system that overvalues technocratic skills and undervalues social and moral skills that any healthy society should value. It's sad that we spent decades trying to build a more representative leadership class, but we've ended up with an educated elite that doesn't know much about the rest of America and doesn't seem more competent than the elites that preceded it. If SCOTUS rips out affirmative action Band-Aid, maybe we can address the underlying wounds. So, Julia, I know that you were over multicultural recruitment at Haverford, so I know you've heard all these arguments, replace race with class. What are your thoughts on the argument Brooks makes?
This might be, for me, the maybe sole silver lining that may come out of the inevitable decision to remove race-conscious admissions. It could be better than that potentially, but I've actually already seen some colleges respond to this. So as a counselor, I've been getting sort of emails from colleges that normally send me communications about their fly-in programs for their underrepresented students. So that's usually based on our racial identity. And a lot of them have been saying, we are looking for first-generation college students or those that identify as low socioeconomic background. And I think it is true. We saw this a little with the test optional movement, is that there was an increase in lower income folks and first generation folks with the removal of test scores. And this could be a way to sort of not reinvent the wheel, but blow up how we look at things and actually get at the real underlying issues here. Because of our country's history, it is just more common that a person from an underrepresented racial background will also be low income and or first generation. I've even seen it. I've seen it every time at Harvard, for example, where I might actually have a really well-resourced, wealthy student of color who might be Hispanic or Latinx or also Black African American, and their family went to Harvard and their grandparents went to Harvard. And guess what? Harvard does not see that as we need to think about the racial identity, because that student is coming from a pretty high earning and a well-resourced background. So in some senses, we've been practicing some of this, right? And the University of California system, Georgia, we've seen where there's been some interesting, not proxies for race, but other ways to get at a rich cultural and diverse background by looking at class. One of my favorite people in the whole world, Dr. Sonia Giebel, she just got her, she's actually at her graduation from Stanford. She was one of the lead authors on that New York Times article about the study of looking at the essays that were submitted to the University of California system and how students talk about their identities, and then readers digging into those essays to kind of determine, is this student coming from an underrepresented background? So I really do agree, even with the sort of bombastic statements in this article, but I actually think this could be, while there will be a lot that will be lost, this could be something that really reorients admission and really makes us think deeper about class, which can often be a larger issue than where you're coming from culturally or racially.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. I think that I agree that we're already starting to see schools move in this direction with flying programs, other thing, language, even it's not that common now to see people with a title, director of multicultural recruitment.
Right.
Or, I mean, I'm surprised in some ways Georgia Tech has still kept that. They have like their Black recruitment team.
Wow. Yeah.
And they have one for Latino recruitment team. But I started seeing that language start changing well before this threat. Because remember, we had that last threat to affirmative action.
Right.
And everybody thought it was going down then, and it barely survived. So I've started seeing that language change a long time ago. And we see Director of Access and Equity.
Right.
And all this, like, those are like the new terminology for the person that used to be the student of color recruiter, and you've seen that language morph. Like, I mean, that language was morphing when I was at Westtown.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I always can, it's almost like, B, C, A, D. Like, I can keep track of stuff based on, was I in Philadelphia or Atlanta? So it has to be more than 14 years ago now. So long I've been here. And so I've seen that language starting to change back then. But there is one thing I do want to say. Class is still not a perfect proxy for race.
True.
It can get at a lot. And I'll give you an example. One of the things I've noticed over the years when I do like pro bono counseling for under-resourced families,
Mm-hmm.
I've done that with Black students and I've done it with white students that both looked really poor. Like if you were to run an EFC calculator or something like that, they look identical.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell how many times this has happened for me in the white community, though, Julia, where there's a relative that has resources.
Right. Exactly.
And so you see that it's better than the system we have now for fairness. But I still personally fundamentally have a problem with people acting like race is an illegitimate spectrum to look at, prism to look at things through. Just like if you were to completely try to erase gender or age or any one of these other major social constructs that impact how things are seen.
Right.
And so some of this is kind of in the mode of like color blindness and blah, blah, blah. And look, I get what he's saying. He's basically saying this is probably the best you can do if the Supreme Court does rule it out.
Right.
And so in that context, it's creative. And of course, this is what Landscape has been doing. Landscape is a tool, a College Board tool that a lot of admission officers are trying to do holistic admissions look at to understand the demographics of where students are coming from and to factor that into how they do their file reading. So I think we come down on the same place that you could do a lot worse than this. But I would still say this is not ideal.
Yes, I would agree. And I really appreciate what you mentioned, Mark, because you could still, even for that very well-resourced student I was just talking about, they still walk through the world and experience racism, right? So there might be places where, yes, of course, they can get into Harvard nice and easy, but there are places where they have been mistreated or they have been discriminated against. Whereas somebody who carries white privilege might just already be at an advantage for certain resources or respect or options and sort of some background resources. And I always talk about myself in that vein. So I'm half white, I'm half Latinx. My mom is an immigrant from Central America. So on one side, I'm first generation American too. And I have so much privilege in this world being perceived as a white presenting person. And my mom and I walk through the world super differently. And my mom didn't get the opportunities that I got whatsoever. So even though we have the same resources together, I see her experience life really differently. And so that is what I am worried about in the loss, is not being able to sort of honor and understand all of the different sort of barriers and discriminatory pieces that Black and Latinx and Indigenous and other folks of color do experience.
Yeah, I mean, take the storming of the Capitol. I mean, I think if anybody's honest, if those would have been Black people, or if they would have been foreign looking,
yep.
Indian or foreign looking, forget it, gun down.
Yep.
Lisa talks about this because her oldest daughter is adopted and very Indian looking. And then her youngest son adopted and can pass for white. And the amount of privilege that he gets compared to her and the things that they experience. And now they have to try to decipher how much of this is race versus gender,
Sure.
which complicates it. Is this male privilege or is this racial?
Right.
But so I just do want to put a point out that I don't think this is ideal.
Right.
But I do think it's a creative way of addressing the realities of what is likely to be decided. Now, this is running probably after the Supreme Court decision is made.
Yeah.
So if
What if we're
they
wrong?
shock us and we're wrong, I have some massive editing to do.
I will gladly be wrong in
I
this
will gladly be
situation.
wrong too. I will gladly be wrong as well. So it's just now one thing he did say in this, and I want to go back to this. So those studies that were done that showed you could have more racial diversity by using class, they took on two things that I don't think a lot of people are going to want to take on, which was it was getting rid of legacy and it was getting rid of faculty.
Exactly.
So that probably sounds good in a theoretical world, but we are a long ways away from that. Now, we have had other podcasts on here to talk about the fact that historically in the states that have gotten rid of race-based affirmative action, they have also taken on legacy simultaneously. So we'll see how that plays out here. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure from both sides.
Yep.
Pressure from the alumni and oftentimes the money behind a lot of the schools versus saying, okay, how can we protect a wealthier privileged class and not protect over here?
Right.
So I'd love to be a fly on some boardrooms in some schools on that one, Julia.
Right. Yeah. I think people will have a busy summer, unfortunately.
Now, since Julia and I recorded this, Wesleyan University, Carnegie Mellon University, and the University of Minnesota have all dropped legacy admissions, and who knows, by Thursday, there may be more schools as the dominoes are falling. We had a question that came in recently. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you this. You guys have a lot of great conversations on affirmative action. I don't hear as much conversation about how it will impact Asian Americans. How would you respond to that? Because we also know Asian can be very nuanced depending on what Asian bucket you go in. And we also know that some schools are doing holistic admissions at a different level than others, and others are more box checkers and not doing it with the full nuance. But I'd love to hear what you have to say on that, Julia.
Right. There's a lot of really good work out there, especially with NACAC, that where they have had panels and webinars with people from various Asian backgrounds. It's important to note that they've done multiple surveys. The majority of Asian Americans do support race-conscious admissions. Now, I actually get this question all the time, especially I work at an independent school and it's a boarding school, and we do have a large population of maybe overrepresented Asian ethnicities. So students
South Asian, Southeast Asian, what?
No, so China or Hong Kong. And then they have actually shown, for example, engineering, while there might be an overrepresentation of Chinese students, there's an underrepresentation of South Asian students and Southeast Asian students. And so very good point about how it's really nuanced as well. It's not just the category of Asian or Asian American. But I also have to, it's not that simply just the race that is what is somewhat complicating admissions. It is just like my independent schools kids, there are students that are overrepresented in the admission process, and there's simply just not space. Even like I remember doing a case study with Rice, and they had a first generation Latinx student come up, and I was like, and they denied the student. This was a very strong student, and I would have taken them in a heartbeat when I was an admission officer. And it's because they have an overrepresentation of this really high achieving group. And so they can be a little more discerning with that. But I think it's really important to look at sort of the research and the data behind some of the decisions that colleges make based if you look at the sort of population of Asian American or Asian admission rates.
Yeah, and schools that are really doing holistic admissions at a deeper level, they are really looking at that. And so they're not just going to put everybody in the Asian bucket.
Right.
They're going to look, and so some traditionally underrepresented Asian groups have been Hmong, Burmese, definitely Cambodian, in some cases in Indonesian, Thai Vietnamese, and in certain cases, Japanese.
Yes.
And Laotian as well. So those are some of the underrepresented Asian groups. And oftentimes, if you've been in one of those groups, you are bringing a cultural perspective that schools don't have.
Right.
And it can, pre whatever the ruling comes out now, has been an extra thumb on the scale because it's value that you're bringing. And also, schools do like to tout their student of color number, and Asian Americans do go in there, and they like to show how that student of color number is growing. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I mean, it really is school by school on this.
Yes.
And to some extent, Asian group by Asian group.
Yep.
Because
Absolutely.
it could be, all those groups could be like, oh, this is unique, we don't have that. And then they may not feel that way for Chinese or Indian, which are oftentimes two of the more frequently larger Asian populations that you'll see in an applicants pool, especially at some of the more highly selective schools. And some of that has to do with immigration patterns and who came over here as doctors and professors and how they got their visas. And then kids coming from those privileged backgrounds have those advantages, creating a much wider swath. And that's one of the reasons why you're right, Julia. I've seen statistics that say 70% of Asians support affirmative action because they don't like the playing of one Asian group against another, the model minority myth, the exploitation. And they're very much aware there are social class benefits in some Asian circles that don't pertain to all Asian circles. And they have more of a complex and nuanced understanding of that. Right.
I want to give a little shout out to one of my favorite community-based organizations, Bright Prospects, which is outside of Los Angeles, California. And they serve nearly all first-generation, a lot of them are first-generation Americans, and low-income students. And the majority of the students they serve, even in the Los Angeles area of California, are some of these South Asian groups or Filipino groups of students. And we would be so happy, and we admitted almost always, the students that came from Bright Prospects at Haverford, because they did bring such a rich cultural background and they were underrepresented. And Haverford is a small liberal arts college. We were underrepresented with Chinese Americans and Chinese students, and especially for international students. When you're a small liberal arts college, you might not have a name everywhere, and so there are plenty of very selective schools that are still going to be where Asian applicants are not overrepresented in that admission pool.
I'm glad you said that, because you're talking about Chinese and Indian, and Korean, which are three of the larger Asian populations that you get. Filipino's been harder for me to get a read on, like some places, if they see it as underrepresented or not. I've had mixed responses on that one, where some of the others I think have been more clear cut. But yeah, I mean, just keep in mind, friends, schools want what they don't have.
Yep. And
that's true for everything. So if they don't have that Appalachian kid, that rural voice on their campus, they're going to want that. If they don't have very many kids from the Pacific Northwest or from the mountain region of the country, I was talking to a school a while ago, and an admission officer, and he found out I was in Atlanta, and he said, "Can you find me a kid from Louisiana? We don't have anybody from Louisiana," And so that's just the mindset of put every single voice and background around the table and create a learning laboratory where you can learn from each other, because so much learning happens outside the classroom. But obviously, we're going to have to come back to this. It feels a little weird in some sense airing this. But my thinking of this, Julia, is no matter what decision is made, I still think this is kind of evergreen content. The debate still will exist. To what degree could you achieve diversity goals and aims through class-based measures?
Right.
Yeah. So any takeaways for our listeners?
In many ways, I think, as much as this is a scary situation, I think it has really helped people think about affirmative action in a more nuanced way. And at the end of the day, if you look at all of the amicus briefs that were submitted, these are really well-respected institutions. The United States military, on top of Harvard and UNC, that all find merit and benefit in having a diverse population. And you wouldn't normally see the military filing something like that, but they have for almost every time affirmative action has been contested. And it's just, I think it's really, there's some really good bright spots in there that are making people think a little more seriously about how does race play out, not only in college, but in our culture.
I've shared this story once before, so those in our listening family may have already heard it, but I'm going to share it again. So when I wrote my book, 171 Answers, and I was doing this back in 2016, we were looking for a cover, and we had this idea of a cover of like all these hands up in school, like eager beaver hands up in school, because the idea is the book is, I took the 171 most frequently asked questions I get as a college counselor, and each chapter is an answer to a question. So we kind of had the idea of having these hands up. And I had a little focus group that I was using to bounce all these ideas off of. And so we had 6 in the focus group, 3 men, 3 women. And I was doing this particular question. I threw the cover out just by email, just in a little email group. And all 3 of the guys liked the cover. And all 3 of the ladies said, "If those are dude hands, no nail polish, look at the fingernails, look at those stubby, chunky fingers there. If you're going to go with that, you need to have gender diversity in your hands." Mm-hmm. And the point being that without the diversity of the female voice, us males were completely oblivious to that perspective.
Right.
We didn't even see it.
Right.
And so that's, I say that because sometimes, not always, but sometimes, particularly sometimes majority students think, oh, let's talk about diversity. It's like all this political correctness.
Right.
And they kind of label it that way. And they don't sort of see like tangible, practical value to having your thinking challenged and having new perspectives brought in.
Yeah.
And so like we would have gone out with a completely, one-sided, not thinking about women at all cover if we had not had that diversity in our focus group.
Absolutely. And research totally backs that up. It shows that you're better able to problem solve if you're exposed to other perspectives and ways of approaching a problem. You're actually likely to be a more empathic and accepting person if you're exposed to people who are different than you. And you're likely to manage conflict better. And sort of manage intent and impact in ways that everyone emerges from what could be an uncomfortable situation, feeling human and feeling like you've got the right tools to really work across difference. So it is just really, really valuable to be exposed to different cultures and different ways of thinking.
Yeah, and one of the reasons college feels so passionate about it, in addition to all of those things, they have enough tools in their tool bag to be able to identify someone that they know can be academically successful.
Absolutely.
So like we've got the research. We know we can find someone that will be academically successful and then bring all this value at it. Why would we not want that on our campus? And that's why, I've said this before, they're going to fight for diversity no matter what the Supreme Court has decided. So hopefully that was helpful, listeners. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Lisa, I think I met my match in you. I thought I was visiting a lot of colleges this summer, but you are like trailblazing all over.
I still think you've got me beat by they're probably a double-digit figure, but
both of us,
doing my best.
We're getting out there. Because I know you've been in North Carolina and Georgia, Montreal. You went international on me. So that was great. Yeah. But hey, that's what we got to do, right? So it's all good. So I know we have an anonymous question today. Anything you want to say to tee it up?
No, I think this is actually a really interesting question and it has a lot of nuance to it. So let's listen to it.
Great.
Hi, I'm calling from Arizona, and I am just wondering if my child should add their photo to their college email account, the one that they use for college admissions purposes. It is a Google Gmail account, and there is an option to upload your photo or a photo. And also, should they use their photo on their college resume? Um, I've seen some samples online that have that, some that do not. I'm just wondering what you advise.
So I like this question a lot. I have a very strong opinion on this question that goes back to my time in admission. And I saw how people reacted to photos in a way that was almost always positive. I felt photos really humanized people, and probably some admission officers probably train people not to, or they do their best to say, don't be like subjectively influenced by like a handsome photo or a cute photo, or whatever. But we know the nature of the human brain and how it works. Like, people are human, and you see a nice photo and it personalizes people. And so, how, when we have our sample resumes, we have photos on them, and that's intentional.
Right.
Listen, I'm not trying to say this is a major deal and you got in because you had a photo and you got rejected because you didn't. I'm not trying to make it look at that level. And I know the question also asks about Gmail. I haven't seen anything really there per se, on a personal level. But on a resume, there's so many things. And here's where you can come in as a psychologist. Just things that like subjectively influence impressions, and research on first impressions and how factors, that we may not even be thinking of change the perception of how people are seen. Anything you want to share at all?
Oh, yeah, I think that is absolutely true, and it does personalize. It's a little harder to reject a kid whose picture you've seen, I think, from a psychological standpoint. And maybe they have like a really cute picture of them with their puppy or something. Then you're just like, aw, but it's harder to do that. I also think, given the recent Supreme Court ruling, if there is something that you want the admissions officer to know about you that they could tell from your picture, it might be a good move to put a picture on your email address and on the resume.
Yeah. And, I think what I'd love to talk about here, I agree with everything you said. And I shared this a little bit at the end of the last episode on Monday when I read a quote from a former admission officer from MIT about it's incredibly hard to admit someone if you don't like them. And I don't think we talk about that a lot enough, which is sort of that subjective factor. I think we sometimes, when I hear conversations about admissions, it's very almost like sterile. It's like GPA and how many APs and SAT and ACT scores. And there are like just so many other factors that go into determining who's admitted and who's not admitted. But in general, it's my experience that you advocate at committee for people that you like. You advocate at committee for people that you would want to spend time with, that you would enjoy being around. You don't really get excited about numbers. Now, at less selective schools, kind of numbers you're just automatically in. But when we're getting into like more selective schools where it's not enough just to have good numbers, a lot of factors that have to do with likability end up playing a role in who gets in and who doesn't. And, it kind of used to bother me because people used to literally say, oh, exactly what you said. He's so cute. Look at that. Stuff like that. It was almost like sometimes moms like, oh, like, looks like that could be my son. And it was very interesting to me. Conversations that I would hear about photos. Of course, there's an interesting history with photos in applications. There was a time that they were used to exclude Jewish students. And they were required when certain highly selective schools felt like the Jewish population was growing more than they were comfortable with. And so a number of things, including requiring photos, requiring height to be included, were used in a discriminatory way. But I feel we've come a long ways from that right now. And most people with a good photo are going to look presentable with a nice smile. It's kind of like, In some ways, it reminds me of like some of the training I do when I'm training people for interviews, right? Like I always say, have a nice smile, make eye contact. Like a nice smile is really powerful. You can have a really nice smile in a photo. And the nice thing about a photo is you can pick and choose the one that goes up there. It's not like someone just gets to randomly take you on your worst day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I'm a huge advocate of photos on resumes. I really am, but I don't want to make someone think, oh, I've got the secret sauce now. This is why my kid's getting in. I don't think other people at this school are going to have photos and we're going to have a photo and that's my ticket. Like, no, I'm not trying to go there. But listen, we're always trying to put our best foot forward in every way. And to me, a photo is another example of doing it. And so I'm probably a bigger advocate of this than some because I literally have seen sort of people react in really positive ways and literally comment on it. Almost so to the point where I know some schools actually don't even allow them because they think that there's an opportunity to enter a discriminatory aspect to it.
Yeah, that's going to be real tricky now, I think.
Yeah, and I don't see a lot of that, but I have seen it before. I can't even name a school right now that has an explicit no photo policy, although maybe one of our listeners out there may know that. But yeah, you're right. It is going to be tricky now. We're in a whole new different era of college admission. So thank you, anonymous listener. I believe it was Arizona, that sent that in because I love this question and keep sending these SpeakPipe questions in. Lisa and I were talking before we recorded today. I think we have 74. So you guys are stepping up to the plate and we're probably going to have some more answers on Monday episodes just because, we're doing our best to not get 2 to 3 months behind and we answer a question for a senior and they no longer need the input.
They're a senior in college.
We're a senior in college. Thank you. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Lisa. Now, this anonymous listener from Arizona is our third listener to get a copy of Elliot Felix's excellent book, How to Get the Most Out of College, subtitled 127 Ways to Make Connections, Make It Work for You, and Make a Difference. Also want to thank my wife, Anitra, who sends these books out through stamps.com to all of our listeners who send in SpeakPipe questions that we read on the air.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in the fourth and final part of my interview with Akil Bello, Akil answers the question, what is his advice to someone who's struggling with test anxiety? What should they do? How should they handle that? And then Akil goes on the hot seat. We get to know him outside of the test prep guru on the personal side. Listen and enjoy. So I have one last test prep question for you, and then we have our lightning round where I put you on the hot seat and get to have some fun offside.
So the seat till now has not been hot.
You're not the first one to say that. Lighthearted stuff. So there's a person who I work with. I don't do test prep, but I work with them on the counseling side. They are crushing it in their practice tests. And then they go into the real test and they just completely freeze. I mean, I've seen people, not seen because I wasn't there, but they report back to me that they ran out. They just couldn't finish. What I'm getting at is test anxiety is definitely real. And what's your advice to someone who struggles with test anxiety? Like they do well in practice and the pressure and the stress and the heart beating and
test
the
palms, baby. Come on now.
It's nice having a new option. That we're fortunate to have that tool in the toolkit these days, aren't we?
That is the very definition of why we need test optional. Right? Chill out. Stop spending money on it.
Well, the thing about it, I'm talking about kids getting 1500s in practice, so they sort of know they can do it.
Okay.
So they want to be able, I want to be able to do what I'm doing in private when I get on the court for the big game. Make all my free throws in practice, and I get in the game, and I go 2 for 10.
Here's why that analogy doesn't work. Because the test ain't the game. Right? Like, that's the whole... Like, the game is college. Go to college and kill it. Great. We can do it without the test. Right? So, my initial answer, and I say this mostly seriously, why are we doing it? Like, there's just no reason to go through all this stress and whatever, unless you're in Florida and trying to go to a Florida club, like, okay, or Georgetown, fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So if there is a reason for it, then
Florida's a pretty big state.
That's true, and no one should move to Florida. So I think the initial answer is 80% of colleges will let you apply and admit you happily without the test score. The secondary answer is, remember that this test isn't determining everything, because 80% of colleges will admit you. So let's relieve some of the pressure that somebody is putting on this test and probably creating a lot of anxiety there. I tell my students all the time, I got a 100-point edge on you because I actually don't give a damn about my score. When I take the test, guess what? Anybody who ever knows I take the test, I'm going to tell them I got a 1600, whether I got a 1600 or not, because there is no way for you to check. So I have absolutely no pressure on my score. It makes it really easy to go into the test with no pressure. So I would do all I can for that student to make them understand that their future isn't riding on this test. And hopefully that is the case, right? Because if they're trying to go to Georgetown and they need matching national merit money, or they're trying to go to Alabama and they need, then it may be largely riding on the test.
But
right?
that's really rare. There's a lot of other schools, a lot of other choices,
right.
and
right.
very few people fixate and have to go to one. And even if you get high scores, you're not guaranteed to get into Georgetown. So,
right. Yeah. So for me, right, that's why test optional is such a great option, because I can't imagine who the person would be that absolutely in 2023 needs to take this test. I just don't see that world.
And a lot of times the public doesn't believe that that you can really get into selective schools with test optional, but I see it. I see kids all the time that get in the most selective schools without test scores. Now they have every other thing else going for them.
Let me give it to you this way. Mm-hmm. I challenge anyone who doesn't believe to pull up the CDS of the common data set for that college from 2018, and then pull it up from 2021 or 2022 and look at section C9. When they show you the percentage of people who were enrolled and submitted SAT scores, and then the percentage of people who submitted ACT scores, right? What I did is I actually added them up.
Yeah.
So across all colleges in 2018, the average SAT plus ACT, which is a little weird because some people submitted both, right?
Correct.
But in 2018, that average was 105%. So across all colleges, 105% of people submitted, we had more than 100% of scores being submitted from enrolled students. In 2021, it was 52.
Yeah.
And that's enrolled students. So,
well, not only that, some pretty selective schools, I do that as well. I'll show that to people. You don't even have to go to Common Data Set. You can just go to College Navigator under the admissions tab, and they have it there.
Yep.
And BU, 38% submitting.
And that's enrolled students.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So, I don't know how more real than that it gets, right?
Yeah.
These are the people who showed up on campus. So I think that's the beauty of test optional. It allows you to take the pressure off of performance on this test.
All right, let's shift gears. This has been great. How do you relax? How do you have fun? How do you unwind? How do you chill?
Basketball.
Oh, you still get out and play?
I still get out and play, and it's so sad I got to get in shape today. I couldn't make a layup.
Because if you graduated in '89, that means you've hit the 5-0, man.
I am in my 50s.
Yes.
I can no longer beat my 17-year-old, which we won't talk about loudly,
but at least you play.
I do.
I retired in the 40s on that game. How about Couch Potato enjoy watching LeBron?
I play basketball, I watch basketball, and then I watch sci-fi.
There you go. Cool. You could drive any car. Someone says, you know what? You helped my kid. Very wealthy person here. You pick any car lot. I'm buying it for you. What car are you going to drive?
Assuming I can resell it, the most expensive one I can find.
Now I know you're an entrepreneur and a businessman, but you can't resell. You have to just drive.
I don't know. I'm not a car dude.
You're a New York guy. You takes the train.
I need my insurance to be low. I need the taxes to be
I
low.
know.
I
Oh,
need
you're
a
a true New
decent car.
Yorker.
I am so not a brand person. I hate the worshiping of brand we do. So I
Sure.
just want a nice
Well, I
car.
wasn't even asking
Service
about
me well.
brand. It might be just something that you might think is comfortable or looks good or something.
Yeah, that's all. I need it to look good, be comfortable, and drive well for 10 years. That's
I'm not really a car guy either. I mean,
yeah.
I like a good, comfortable car, but I'm not. Some people are really car guys.
Yeah, nah.
What's the place in the world you haven't been to you really want to get to on the bucket list?
Ooh, so many. Um, Australia, the Galapagos, Egypt. Uh, those are three. We go right
There you
there.
go. That's good. That's good.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
This is Linda, and today's recommended resource is the website College Tuition Compare. This website has compiled a database of tuition costs for colleges that's searchable by school name or state. You can also search for community colleges, graduate programs, law and medical schools, and for online programs. You can search for schools with the highest graduation rates, search for the largest colleges, colleges with the highest yield rates, or schools with the highest SAT or ACT scores. You can also search by major or field of study to get average wage comparisons based on data from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. The site also features a comparison tool that can be used to look at rival institutions. So if you want to see how Michigan State fares, say against University of Michigan, off the football field, you can do that here. It looks at data points like tuition and fees, average financial aid packages, acceptance rates, test scores, retention and graduation rates, and student to faculty ratios. Information is pulled from the database of accredited post-secondary institutions and programs and the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System, or IPEDS. Get started comparing tuition and other key points of schools you're interested in at collegetuitioncompare.com.
Tell me somebody who's not here anymore that if you could have a couple hours lunch with them, you'd pick that person. Non-relative. I don't want to hear.
Okay,
I don't
I
want
was
to hear.
thinking
Don't
relative
want to
for
hear
sure.
great grandpa. No great
I was
grandpa
thinking relative
answers.
for sure. Okay. Ooh, somebody who's not here that I want to have lunch with. That's interesting. I don't know. Let's go easy.
Told you this
Malcolm
is the hard
X.
part. Now you see why I call it the hot seat. You're squirming.
Malcolm X or Tupac? That's what comes to
There
mind.
you go. And what would you talk about?
Probably the same things. I was actually in Buenos Aires and I learned where he got his name. I'd missed the whole thing where Tupac got his name. It was from a revolutionary in South America. So it'd be really interesting to talk to Tupac, especially just about his activism as well as the sort of counter to that popular music and rap. And so, like the conundrum, the pole of those two forces is really interesting. And I think there's a lot of that same similar conflict within Malcolm X that I find intriguing.
Let's say somebody alive.
Alive. Who's somebody alive that I would like to talk to? I don't know. Let's go easy. Michael B. Jordan. I don't know, Angela Bassett. No, I can't have lunch with Angela Bassett. I just spent my whole time, worshiping.
Well, maybe that's an answer. That means you wouldn't turn it down.
I absolutely would not.
What's a book you've read that's you recommend? This is a book you all need to read.
Book you all need to read. One of the hundreds I have over here. Which book can I recommend that you all need to read? I'm currently have bookmarked. Hang on, let me just grab what's here.
Sure.
All right, so I'm gonna just go with some of the titles that are here, and we won't make any comments about. I don't really know why these titles are here, but there is Shortchanged by Annie Abrams. There is Rethinking College Admissions by Oyan Poon, which I think is a really good read, although it's technical and research heavy. There's also, now I don't have it right here, but I had it the other day. Ron Lieber's book, which is
Price You
really
Pay
good.
for
The
College.
Price You Pay for College.
Yeah, I'm about
And
to
then
interview him August 1st.
okay,
coming up,
and
yeah.
Paul Tuff's book is also another one that I think is more
Which
parent
one?
friendly.
Because he's got the books about. He's got several books. He's got How to Succeed or Why Kids
no,
Succeed.
the Inequity
the
Machine.
one about the Inequality
That one.
Machine.
Yeah,
He's a really deep guy. I got to meet him. He did a speaking tour for that book. Remember, it was rebranded under another name initially.
Yes.
Before it was rebranded.
I didn't know that was a thing until that happened.
Yeah, and another thing I noticed about him is he's got really good footnotes in his books. Like, he really
interesting.
he likes to get in the lab and do some research.
Okay.
You can get a lot of you can really just pick up some great reads just tracking down his footnotes.
Okay, that's interesting. I don't know that I noticed that.
Yeah, no, he's a writer that he comes out with a new book I'm buying right away.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, last question, because you were squirming over there. You were proving it was hot seat. You're better at college test prep questions. You can spew them out in your sleep. So we have our listeners are mostly parents, then college counselors second, students third. It is what it is. We can't compete with TikTok. We got a 2-hour podcast. What is your advice for those three groups? Any order: students, parents, college counselors.
Parents, my advice is turn down the noise, especially around college. Right? Recognize that a lot of the conversation around college is about brand, not education. None of the rankings truly evaluate the education received. They try to use other things as a proxy for the education received. Right,
deep.
so I think you have to train.
That could have been a whole interview right there.
So you have to turn down the noise of friends, families, counselors, anybody who leads with this name, this brand is meaningful is probably not somebody I would listen to. Turn down the arguments of policy. If you are a parent of an 11th grader, you don't care about policy, you care about practice. You care about how am I going to navigate the system that currently exists. Now, you should argue for better policy, but you have to navigate the practice as
okay, you're getting a little deep and theoretical for me. What do you when you say policy? What are you talking about? The school's policy?
Should test scores exist? Should they be required?
Okay.
Like, none of that matters. Is it required for my kid? Like, that's all I need to know. I need to know, is it required? Not should it be. Ain't no should if I'm trying to get my child into Georgetown. It does, whether I like it or not.
I get it.
Right. So I think parents need to focus on navigating the system that exists and turning down all of the noise that makes it terrible. I'm going to try to ban my child from putting anything on TikTok about got in or didn't get in, all of that sort of stuff. I hate it all.
Right. And parents do it too.
Yeah. Counselors need to learn, counselors should also sort of take that same advice, but recognize that, I know they have different pressures, right? Like, schools sometimes want the kids saying stuff on TikTok, right? So, announcing how many scholarships they got and all of that nonsense, right? I think we all need to turn down the noise around college as a badge and as a brand. And once we do that, I think this whole process gets better, right? And counselors can help do that. Parents can help do that, right? And I think that my advice for everybody is kind of the same, because that's really the thing that I've been looking at and focusing on these days is just that's what the highly rejected thing started as, right? All these people who are speaking about this college because of their selectivity rate, that's a popularity contest. That's somebody telling you you're pretty. It doesn't actually mean anything.
I read an article you wrote where you basically said, we need to stop reading the New York Times for college. Remember that? It was because they're always talking about Harvard and Princeton and Stanford and MIT and all that. I've actually heard Ron Lieber, who you referred earlier, because he sometimes, gets blowback on that. And he's been really transparent. He said probably 30% of our audience either thinks they can get in Harvard or they're Harvard curious.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I got to write stuff people read.
Yeah. And I love that that's one of the reasons I like him, because he's so transparent about that. He's like, I write for my audience.
Yeah,
my audience isn't everybody, but I write for my audience. And that's fair, right? I also I don't tend to mention test prep companies much, but I actually like Compass Prep because they also do the same. All their list of colleges, like, this is 400 schools we talk about. They're not saying these are the only 400. They don't call them best or like, these are the 400 our folks want to know about. I kind of like that. That has a very clear transparency to it, right? And I think that if everyone does better of saying, like, there's a particular group of schools we're going to talk about and here's why, then that makes things make more sense, right? If somebody doesn't,
at least it's 400 and not 40. That's
right.
my view.
Right. Yes, there is that. Right. I mean, like, I saw a podcast recently about rural, regional public institutions, regional public universities. Right. It's like, yeah, they serve a very big purpose in their region.
Sure.
And they're often ignored on the national stage, right? Despite the quality of the education provided and the support that they give the region they're in. So my advice sort of for everybody is sort of the same thing. Do what you can to combat the culture of brand obsessiveness that has surrounded college and subsumed questions of education and teaching and learning.
Akil, this has been great. You've been most generous with your time. You've given us an hour and a half of your time. If somebody wants to contact you, either because they want to do test prep with you or they want to invite you to come speak at their event, I know you do some public speaking and some of that kind of thing, whether it's on Zoom or travels or whatever. How do they reach you?
The easiest way to reach me is, unfortunately, until it dies the death that the South African is trying to create for it, is probably Twitter. I'm just Akil Bello on Twitter. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. Those are probably the easiest way. I also have my own blog, akilbello.com. Basically, I'm Akil Bello everywhere that I'm allowed.
Now, why don't you just spell your name, just in case someone's driving or listening or walking the dog or something?
It's as simple as it can get. AKILBELLO.
This has been great. I look forward to breaking bread with you sometime, my friend. Keep up the good work.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Friends, hopefully you heard the first part of Lisa and I discussing East Carolina University upon her recent visit there. Hope you'll enjoy part 2.
They do have some like early assurance, I guess, programs with like the med school, nursing, maybe the dental school. I mean, there are not that many spots for those. So, but they do have them. And so some students can apply into that in their freshman year, knowing that then they're going to go to medical school, for instance. They have 200 spots in the Honors College, and then they have 10 transfer spots. So the 200 is for freshmen and the 10 is for transfers. And in order to apply, you have to have a 3.8 unweighted or 4.2 weighted GPA. And they said they get 3,000 apps usually for 200 spots, although I think they have a problem yielding some of those high flying kids.
I have a question.
Kids,
200, are those 200 freshmen that can, they're doing well as freshmen and they get in, as opposed to high school seniors that have...
No, it's high school seniors.
Oh, okay. High school seniors. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just, you can't apply as a freshman.
Okay.
You can only apply like before you enter the school, unless you're a transfer, then, maybe they'll let you apply. One of the other things that I thought was nice about ECU is they're really trying to increase diversity and be supportive of first-gen students. So they have a number of scholarships that are focused on first-gen students. For instance, when we were there, they had a special cohort of kids who are first-gen, low income, and they're bringing them in to the sciences, or kids who want to study the sciences, and they had them there early to, and they're having classes, and they're really just trying to give this cohort a lot of support to make sure that they're successful. They also have a lot of special mentoring, living learning communities. that are designed to increase, participation by first-gen students. I think, they are rated for the social mobility index in the top 10%. That's something that they take a lot of pride in at ECU, which is basically, the extent to which a school can move someone who's more economically disadvantaged into like well-paying jobs after graduation. So we took a tour of the new student union, and it was very thoughtfully designed. And part of that, I know that because the man who's giving us the tour is like, the dean of student service. And so he was talking just about how they structured everything to encourage participation in terms of the architecture. But there's hundreds of clubs at ECU, and Greek life compromises about 13 to 15% of the students. So it's there if you want it, but if you don't want it, you can do other things. They had a pretty big LGBTQ center and a pretty big diversity center on campus. And I guess sort of the attitude from the administration is if you don't like it, don't go in, but we're having it. And, we just ask that you just don't go in if you have a problem with it. So sports is really big at ECU. They're Division I. So they took us to the football stadium. And a lot of the people I was on the tour with were school counselors from the area. And they were very excited because they all had to show me where their season ticket seats were. And then they had to talk about which ones are closer to the bathroom. And, they were very, very excited to be on that tour. And like, if you live in town or near town, I think, the sports at ECU are probably like a central feature of life there. Their mascot is Petey the Pirate. He's gone through 4 versions, one of which I think they called him Fat Petey because but now he's more like a skeletal kind of pirate. So not fat. Dorms are required for the first year. And I would say might be a spot where they might be a little weak in terms of other schools, because it's just all hall style dorms. So there's not like the suite style, it's just, your basic cinder block room with the bathrooms in the hall. But you are required to live there for the first year. And then most people move to apartments or Greek housing. Any questions on student life?
No, I'm impressed by a lot of things you said. I'm really impressed with the healthcare pathways. A lot of things you said about the support services, and and just really how high touch they are and comprehensive. Certainly what you said about learning support, and then I liked what I heard about the the honors college. So those are all great things. I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about the admission profile.
Oh, well, that's great, because that's what's next in my notes.
I teed that up. We planned that ahead of time. No, just kidding.
No, we didn't. But I think we've done enough of these together that we kind of know. So it was really sort of hard to get a sense of what their admissions rate is, because it was widely divergent on many different sources. So I'm going to say somewhere between 70 and 90%. Depending on who you ask.
Are they admitting by school?
Yes, they are admitting.
So that would create that divergence too.
Yeah. And the average GPA is 3.3, but every year it goes up. The average SAT scores run between 500 and 600 for verbal and math. And the ACT scores they run between 19 and 24. But those are, they're all continuing to go up. They're test optional now. And they used to be test blind. But then they were the North Carolina Board of Governors was not cool with that. So then they were forced to be test optional. And then now they say they're going to be test optional next year, but they don't know what the Board of Governors are going to do after that. But if it was up to them, they would go back to being test blind. And their yield is around 20%. So, I think that's a piece where they feel like they could do better.
Yeah, it's pretty common for regional publics. I think that one thing I noticed, I see this a lot of states. I see it in Georgia, I see it in Texas, I see it in North Carolina, is that, just to name a few, these are growing states. So you're experiencing an influx of people into the area. And so that does end up just increasing the selectivity of all of the in-state schools, because you just have more, like not everybody can go to Chapel Hill or NC State. And so there's going to be spillage over to that next level of this within the publics. I'm not even talking about like the Dukes and the Elons and the Wake Forest and the Davidsons, like staying outside of the private school world, just focusing on the public schools for now. And so, because, Charlotte is getting, more hot. Wilmington's getting more hot. App State is getting more hot, East Carolina. And I think a lot of that is just inevitable because you have more people moving in. And also, as I said before, North Carolina is a very popular vacation destination for people in the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. So that builds a comfort level with like so many times when I'm working and a student from outside of the area, they'll say they're comfortable with the Carolinas and they may not be comfortable with further south than that. Mm-hmm. And some of that is distance from home, but a lot of it is, we vacation there. And so, you know what I mean? You just build a comfort level. So that's in addition to the influx. So I'm saying all that to say I'm not surprised for you to say it's a school with ascendancy. And if you think about, we've said that about Wilmington, about Charlotte, really Elon and High Point as well. And App State, Asheville to a certain extent. So I think, North Carolina is just a pretty attractive place for a lot of people to go to college.
Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful state, and it's got a lot of, like, if you like beaches, we got that. If you like cities, we have that. If you like mountains, we have that. You want a lake, we have that. So, I mean, there's a lot of really great natural features and, variety in North Carolina.
And warm weather and pretty good out of state affordability too. Right.
Yeah, and I'll talk about that in just now. Man, you are so good with the segues today.
I don't know about that.
Move smooth right in there to the cost. All right, so I'm going to do out of state first because that's probably relevant to more people. Probably without any merit scholarships, although you can apply for them. Top line is going to be $35,000 a year for your cost of attendance. If you are in state before merit, it's $18,000 a year. So that's, about as affordable as I think a person's going to find.
Yeah, because, we've talked about this before. That's like maybe less than staying in state at Illinois or in state in Pennsylvania.
It's definitely less.
Yeah, in Pennsylvania. So that allows the opportunity to go out of state and even beat your in-state price. And I'm talking about for Publix.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it is very attractive. And of course, I think a lot of people here, if they can get into a UNC school that they feel good about, they're just going to stay there because 18 to 25 versus 80 to 100,000. I mean, it's just a huge difference. And so when I think about this school, like in whole, I think this is a school that is mission focused. And I don't say that about every school, but every single staff member I talked to was focused on the school's mission and trying to improve their outcomes and their student experiences. And everyone seemed like they were the kind of people who would just go out of their way for a student to help. And that's been successful for them. So they are starting to see the numbers that their graduation rates are going up, their selectivity is going up. And I think that's a path that's working for them. I think the school could really be great for a few different types of kids. If you are interested in pre-med or health sciences or biology or education, I think it's got so many strengths there. It's definitely a school to consider. If you want a traditional college experience in a big school, but you need support, this also might be a school to consider because they do offer a lot of support on many different levels. And I think it's also a great second chance school. So let's say you haven't been the best student in high school, but you really have a lot of ability, and with the right situation, you could excel, and you need kind of that second chance. I think that would be a really important school to look at. And then I think, people who want to live in a more liberal area of the South and want a school that comes under 35,000 and out of state should also consider this school.
And I think a lot of times, sometimes people are so more fixated on brand than I feel they should be. We've said that a lot. But when it comes to actually getting jobs, college major is really correlates, right? And so like the healthcare field is booming. You come out of there with a nursing degree, your job placement rate is going to be amazing.
Right.
Amazing.
Right.
And that's the thing sometimes people don't realize.
Yeah, I feel like if I took this school, I renamed it something that no one had ever heard of, and I just described the town without naming it, people are like, oh my gosh, that sounds like really cool. Where is that? I want to go see that. But if I say East Carolina University, they all give me a face like of almost disgust. And it's really kind of disheartening, I think, because I think people are potentially cutting themselves off some really good educational options that are quite affordable.
It just also takes time. It takes time to rebrand and to change old reputations, but it happens over time, and I think they're doing the kinds of things it takes to do it. Get some marquee programs and stuff like the health sciences and STEM, have a really good honors college that can appeal to more of that higher end student, have lots of support to appeal to the student that needs that, and give people a good experience. So I am very, very, very interested in getting there now. You said it's only like an hour 15 from Raleigh?
Yeah. I mean, it took me about an hour because I'm like, 40 minutes
Yeah.
from Raleigh. So it took me like an hour 40 to get there. So it wasn't too bad.
That's almost as long as it took me, when you and I met at, Elon. It was almost that same, like for me, because where I was coming from.
Right.
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 And with both Karis and Joy living together there now, you're going to see me in North Carolina more often.
Well, yeah,
so I can
should
go stay
definitely.
there and shoot out. And I've been doing that, but East Carolina is one that not only had I not seen, I have to admit it. I mean, I know about the school, but it wasn't probably even in my top 5 North Carolina schools to
Right.
get
Right.
to.
No, I think I definitely think it's worth a visit. And they say at East Carolina, if we can just get you here, we can sell you this school. But the problem is they're just trying to get people there, especially the woman who runs the honors college. She's like, if it's a strong student, just somehow get them in my office and they will want to come here by the time. Once I explain everything to them, they'll want to come here by the time that they leave. And I think that's probably true. They're really looking for good students there. But yeah, I don't know. I think it probably will increase in popularity. And I have to say, like in Greenville, like a lot of the people that I talked to, they went on that tour, but their kids had gone there. Their kids were doing great. They're very successful. They're doing great things. So some of it's probably kind of regional, even in North Carolina, like Eastern North Carolina.
And you always find that, right? Like there's such a thing called regional prestige, and every school kind of has it around its area. It's got name recognition. You're constantly bumping into alum, so it's got a household name. It's not, people do work off of the assumption a lot of times if it was any good, I would have heard of it. So there's always a little askance if someone hasn't heard of it, versus when you're in the area, you're just going to constantly be bumping into people that have heard of it. And then if most of those interactions are positive, then it's going to create a positive local prestige.
Right. And it definitely has that. So yeah, I definitely think you should check it out. I have a feeling as, it becomes increasingly hard for North Carolina residents to get into some of the traditionally popular schools. More and more people are going to be taking a look at ECU. And that's a good thing because it offers a lot.
Yeah, I mean, their challenge is going to, they'll probably always have a challenge yielding the 3.5 student and above. But the thing is, there's going to be lots of kids, probably like 2.6, 2.7, up to 3.3, 3.4, that they'll have a much better shot at yielding.
Right. And I should say, those honors college scholarships are pretty generous. And an in-state student can probably go there for almost free, depending on the level of scholarship that they got.
And there's always a person that's very bargain conscious, and either because their funds are limited, or because they have lots of kids and they're doing the long game, or they're thinking grad school, or they just philosophically don't believe that I should have to pay this insane amount of money for college, and that's money that I can use to do other things with. So that will be that's another way they can appeal, which is awesome.
Right.
Thanks, Lisa. You really?
Well, it's my pleasure.
I know that you represented the school well, because I really want to get there now, like badly. So
well, honestly, I think they were, I got invited to this. Ran into them at SACAC, and I said, "Hey, I want to know more about your school. I don't live that far." And like, "Oh, well, you need to come to this counselor day." And I said, "Oh, I thought that
Wow.
was only for school counselors." And they're like, "No, we
Yeah.
will take whatever kind of counselor we can find." And they
Yeah,
signed
good
me
for
up.
you.
And they're trying because they had somebody, an independent counselor from Maryland
Good for
and
them.
an independent counselor from South Carolina, and they were so happy that there were people from outside the state,
Yeah,
because they're really targeting those areas to recruit more
sure.
pirates, as they say. So,
Awesome. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.
all right, bye.
Bye. Friends, on Monday's episode, we've been inundated with Speakpipe questions, and we don't want to get too far behind. So we're going to answer one, and it's from Melissa from Massachusetts. And she wants to know whether there are advantages to filling out a school's specific application as opposed to Common App or Coalition in terms of demonstrating interest to the school. I'll answer that question. And of course, we'll continue Lisa's excellent interview with Dr. Jenny Griffin, the Dean of Apex at the College of Worcester. And I close out with one of the quotes from my book. So this is the 9th of 10. Of course, I have to save the two of my faves for last. And this one comes to us from Martin Walsh, former Assistant Dean of Admission at Stanford. And he says this: I mean, the most common test we had at Stanford was not how smart are they and what have they invented, but it was actually, would you want to share a dorm with this person for a year? Let me repeat that. I mean, the most common test we had at Stanford was not how smart are they and what have they invented, but it was actually, would you want to share a dorm with this student for a year? See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.